So I want to talk to you guys about Israel. Israel's always been in the news, always touted as America's greatest ally in the Middle East. And in the last couple of years, it seems like everything possibly crazy negative about Israel has come out. And I normally don't talk about stuff like this until I feel like I'm ready to. And I think that's where I'm at today based off this experience that I just had. Because let me also first and foremost say that what the hell do I really know? Nothing. Very, very, very little factual detail about what it is I'm going to share with you. But it is derived off of what I've seen, and I've had some pretty real life experiences that kind of tie into this stuff. And so I just want to talk to you all about Israel and what I think at least is a very fair viewpoint. And I hope that it calms these tumultuous tides in a particular way, because there's a lot of justified anger and frustration as well. And that's why things like this get so crazy. It's because people just start talking, and it's usually derived from a source of truth. So I just want to start by saying that I'm holding this document in my hand, cleaning up here in the garage and in the office today a little bit, and I come across this piece of paper, and it says identification card. And my first thought was some sort of a COVID vaccination sheet. But then I quickly realized, no, it's a different tone of color, because those were real things that we were doing just a couple years ago. And I quickly realized that this is from the Holocaust Memorial Museum. And if you ever get the chance to go, it's great. Don't bring kids. I'll say that much. Don't bring kids. Don't. Just go with you and the wife and whomever. And in these, when you go there, you get these identification cards, which are made to kind of like draw you into what it was like to, hey, where's your papers? And inside of here, it has the story of a person who survived or possibly didn't survive the Holocaust. Just a story of somebody who lived during the Holocaust at some point in time. And I'm reading this boy's story, born in Warsaw, Poland, just back in like the 1921 in Warsaw, Poland. Can you imagine the countryside? If you've never been to Poland before, it is just such an amazing, beautiful country with these massive rolling hills with bright green rolling meadows. I describe it as the foothills of the Swiss Alps. And if you've never been to Switzerland and seen the Swiss Alps, my God, it's just the most breathtaking. Everything is just unbelievable. I rode a bike around Switzerland for like a week in the middle of the country in a town where nobody existed. I got shocked in my balls with a cow electric fence because I was walking up the side of this mountain with this on the side of the road. Ferraris and Porsches and Rolls Royces are just speeding by, mixed in with farm trucks, predominantly farm trucks and suburban or urban vehicles and rural vehicles. Anyways, I didn't want to get hit by a car. Went over a fence. If you never touched a cow fence before, if you touch it, it doesn't just zap you. You kind of like leave your pressure up against it, and it builds up, and then it zaps you. And unfortunately for me, I found that out as my balls were resting across it with like 80 pounds of clothing and gear and equipment that I was traveling Europe with. Unexpectedly, I didn't mean to travel with that much stuff, but nonetheless, Poland is a beautiful place, and I can't even imagine what it looked like back then. And his dad studied theology. I don't know what he did much more than that. And his mom worked at the local liquor store. And he went to school and started helping out at the liquor store. But then all of a sudden one day he describes a demonstration. I'm pretty sure that it sounds like it's from their firsthand accounts, at least parts of this. And I think about demonstrations in the streets, and the thing is that there was just one day there was a demonstration, and then all of a sudden it was like everything had changed. A foreign nation had invaded the country, Germany, and had invaded Poland, and everybody in that demonstration was ranting against the Jews. So all of a sudden one day there's just these demonstrations that are taking place ranting against the Jews. Now, I'm not making the correlation with anything going on today and that, but when you just think about there's a certain demographic, for whatever reason, white Christian males are being like persecuted against, and being called racist and sexist and transphobes and all this stuff. It's pretty crazy, but it's just interesting, the correlation between the two. Eventually his parents and him agreed that, hey, like, the Germans are coming, we're afraid you're going to get sent off to work camps. And so now all of a sudden this guy's life is flipped upside down. He's in this beautiful countryside place. Now they're about 40 miles. He moved into the country further outside of Warsaw, which would be even more just beautiful. And then one day, all of a sudden his life changes, and now he's heading on a train to Soviet-occupied portions of the country, which, man, to go from such freedom and fresh air to absolute control is just terrifying, especially for a young boy at 14. At some point there, he was captured and sent into a ghetto, and then from the ghetto he was put into a concentration camp, and then from the concentration camp he spent many years of his life dealing with crazy shit. And he got lucky that he somehow befriended an SS agent who was in charge of the kitchen where he worked, because he got sick and they would normally just let those guys die, but he looked after him for whatever reason. But this same guy killed another Jew in front of him for stealing a potato and told him to clean up the mess. So to give you an idea of the dynamic of just the disparity of existence. And he was one of the few people who survived the march from Buchenwald to the Tyrolean Mountains. I probably pronounced those wrong, near the Austrian border. So it sounds like that they pulled out a bunch of concentration camp people and basically Balakatan death marched them into the Austrian mountains. He was liberated by the U.S. military on May 3rd, 1945. Spent about 3.5 years in a concentration camp. Man. In the Holocaust Museum, it shows you how many, like, the percentage of Jews that were wiped out. I think it was like 60% of all Jews in Europe were wiped out during that time frame. 60%, like millions and millions and millions of people across vast swaths of the globe. That's what's so crazy about it. You hear about massacres in Rwanda and nobody really cares because it's just in Rwanda. It's like, oh, whatever. But if that massacre took place, the same amount of people across 10 different nations in Europe or whatever continent, it would be a much bigger deal. And I'm hearing people say that the Holocaust is made up and Hitler wasn't that bad of a guy and all this stuff, but I don't agree with that. I think the Holocaust absolutely 100% happened, and there have been more than enough survivors who have told their story. And this is what's sad and frightening about one generation later, that we're already forgetting and not paying attention to that stuff. Like, there's like thousands of hours of documented, recorded interviews with a lot of fucking people. And so I will never say, based off everything that I have presented to me at this time, I don't think I would ever say that the Holocaust was not real. And I would have a very hard time ever having my mind changed on that, just because of the accounts of the witnesses and the testimonies. And you look at the globe, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, why do I say this? Because people are talking about Charlie Kirk getting just brutally assassinated by Israeli forces. And, Israelis or Jews own all of Hollywood, and they're controlling all this stuff. Look, what the fuck do you really know? I mean, what do I really know? Again, nothing. But here's where I think, is going on. I don't blame the Israelis for having their hands in everything, because why wouldn't you after something like this? Imagine being that young boy, and it doesn't even say what happened to his parents. Pretty safe to assume they were killed, gassed, shot, executed, stabbed in the throat, raped, and then murdered. It's a very easy assumption. Poland was the first country invaded in World War II, if I'm not mistaken. I think in 1938 or 9, they crossed over some river, and that was it. And Poland still had like horses and stuff. The Germans steamrolled through them. They got tanks and in big open fields, and they just plowed right through it and occupied it and started enforcing Nazism and fascist culture, which, stop with the attacks on the ice and this like using of the word Nazi and fascist. Like, You are so brainwashed if you do that. You are so manipulated. You got to understand. Those are things of recent past that the context in which they're being used currently, there's just absolutely no reason or comparison other than to literally just say something that's so vile and so brutal. It's like when two kids are arguing and then one of them just thinks of the worst thing, or some couple thinks of the worst thing they could just say to the other person. The real Nazis, the real fascists, slaughtered a continent of people, and they tried to keep doing it. That's the thing, is they really were just like, no, we're just going to steamroll this bitch and kill everyone. And these people, the Jews, were at the center of it. Now, I still don't understand much about whatever took place that established the borders between Israel and Palestine, but I am pro-Israel to a degree. My understanding of the past and the history there is that whatever happened, and they were both given their lands. Now, who crossed the border first and who did what? Well, my understanding of it, and again, I could be very wrong about this. So if you have citable sources, I always like to read and try to know what I'm talking about. This Arab League of Nations got together and tried to slaughter Israel. Now, I know this from the book of The Arab Mind by Raphael Patel, because I wanted to understand Middle Eastern culture, Arab culture, and so I read this crazy big books. I don't even know if I read all of it, but I learned so much from it, and this was one of the biggest takeaways, which had to do with ego and pride and stuff like that historically within the Arab culture. All these nations got together and tried to fuck up Israel and destroy them. Israel held their ground because of misreporting from the generals. That's the lesson in the book of resources and the actual battlefield successes. So Israel ends up winning and takes more than what was originally established. Then they were giving some back, but not all of it. Now, after having just gone through World War II and the Holocaust, these are first generation kids. These are the children of people like Ben in this book. That's their kids. Their parents lived through this shit. They're still on the defensive. They're still very amped up at the idea of something like that happening. Their special forces, their tier 1 units, phrase is never again. Meaning that they're going to be proactive in never letting that shit happen again. And I don't blame them, because what person wouldn't? Perhaps a person who's never experienced real trauma like that before. When a woman who has been assaulted decides, I'm never going to let that shit ever happen again, and they come work with me, that's the exact same thing that they're doing, is they're arming themselves with the knowledge and the resources and the capability. Now, they can't just go around offensively blasting people and punching people and stabbing and pepper spraying people. But for a nation in a world that's, when you look at nations, not the people of the nation, but the actual concept of that government, everything is on the table. Everything is on the table for your annihilation. Everything is on the fucking table. There is no ethics. And so in a world like that, yeah, she does go around shooting everybody who walks up to her, and that's basically it, just shooting them, because the world is so evil that you would have to do that, which is what Israel does. So, yeah, I would want to inner circle promote wealth within my people, especially after having gone through a literal 60% annihilation, if I'm not mistaken, massacre all throughout a third of the world, an entire continent. I know a continent is not a third of the world, but when you look at Europe and the span that was affected by it, it was actually multiple continents. I would want to be highly intelligent and successful and encourage my children to do the same if I just survived that shit. Look at George Soros. What that guy's been through. He bets on the market crashing because he basically made a deal with the other side, with the devil, for survival. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't fucking blame him. You have no idea what it's like to be that scared young boy. You have no idea what it's like to go through that. You cried as a baby when your fucking parents left you for daycare and thought they were never coming back. These children, these innocent babies, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, all years of age, had their families ripped from them violently and brutally and murdered, and they were sent off to a fucking concentration camp. So who are you or I to say anything about how they found a way to survive? You no fucking clue. You cry when the power's out. So I don't blame them for telling their children, encouraging their children, coming together as a people and uniting, being like, hey, you can be successful. And if you ever see another Jew anywhere else, you guys need to help each other out. And then they rise through the ranks of corporations very quickly then, because if you're populating those ranks with highly intelligent, successful people who are dedicated to looking out for one another, of course you're going to all flourish. And then you get control. And then you kind of see what's happening in the world. Now, with that all being said, I do find it highly suspect that the single greatest intelligence agency in the face of history of the human and mankind fails to know what's about to take place every day for 6 months in advance around the world in terms of attacking their country. So now we get into like, what the fuck do I really know? I don't know anything. And I encourage you to check yourself and realize the same. And when it comes to things like carpet bombing an entire nation of people, because yeah, sure, I'll recognize Palestine. Why wouldn't I? I mean, everybody's fucked up. They're trying to find their way. They want to establish a little state. I know that there was a deal made with Yasser Arafat, or whatever his name was. I should probably look that up again. But now, for me, because I believe in love and unity and all that stuff, I think not giving people a chance is where we start to get wrong, because it's very oppressive. And I don't agree with carpet bombing city streets and empowering the youth of a nation to go into an occupied territory and just be highly aggressive. But at the same time, I would never allow a terrorist organization to run my fucking city streets with my fucking family and children. I will die long before that ever happens. So it's always multifaceted is my point. Like, I'm very pro-Israel. I'm also very pro-Palestine. And people will say, well, you can't be both because one wants to destroy the other and the other wants to destroy it. I could still be whatever the fuck I want to be. I could be pro-Israel. I could be pro-Palestine. I could be pro-everybody. The contradiction in my thought process only exists within your own mind because your own brain is short-circuiting. I could want there to be a peaceful and prosperous Israel. I could want there to be a peaceful and prosperous Palestine that coexist together along a shared border, that look out for one another and grow and flourish. The fact that you think that can't even happen, that's concerning, bro. Dudette, I would check that out. I would seriously explore that region of your brain, that thought process, because there's something probably purposefully being rewired in there. And it's not your fault. It's not any of our faults. We're dealing with this shit all day long. The programming, the conscious, subconscious programming and rewiring of our brains, and all the bullshit that is constantly being fed to us through all these radio frequencies, TV ads, radio ads, music, everything. You just have to be self-aware of that shit. To say Israel assassinated Charlie Kirk, not saying it's impossible, I just don't see that as feasible. I think sometimes the simplest solution is the answer. I think sometimes some dumb fuck gets lucky and actually misses the intended target, but you know, when it's your time, and it hits where it hit. I think it's horrible. I see that as being way more feasible in terms of complexity than anything else whatsoever. And I saw Sean Ryan's interview with the head of security, and I mean, I believe him. That story, to me at least, checks out in my experience, because you people don't realize, unless you've been in that industry, you're so busy, you're so intertwined and so ingrained with each other that you have to get deals from Israel off on the side. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, But man, there's a lot of layers that you got to go through just to even try to make sense of that type of a story. And so I believe the Holocaust happened. And I believe that we should be very careful about what we allow to be done to us on our city streets. And I think we should also be very careful about the words that we use to describe one another. I don't blame the Jews for having their hand in just about everything, Hollywood and business and legal stuff and politics probably. Like, I don't blame them. I very well can see why the US would bend over backwards for Israel, because they're literally the single greatest plug of intelligence that we've ever seen. And intel is like everything. I don't agree with mass murdering of Palestinians or any people. I don't agree with the over-aggressive nature of a claimed secret attack can be deemed as justified in the name of prevention. And I wouldn't be surprised if the amount of influence that that country had over our government would be so great that it would cause it to literally do things of strategic implication, meaning affecting the globe. Why would that surprise you? The Mossad are the greatest intelligence agency ever in the history of mankind. Don't you want to be plugged into that? Now, I'm not saying that it's justified. I'm just saying that from a government perspective, like if I was the president of the United States, I would be willing to do many things in order to maintain that relationship. I'm not saying one thing or another, not giving specific examples of what I would be willing to do, because we're just going down a rabbit hole at this point. But my point is that it would make sense to me for a president or intelligence director, whomever, to try to appease that. Makes sense. So I don't think that Israel is lizard people running the world. I am very pro-Israel. I'm very pro-Palestine. I don't believe that Palestinians should let Hamas run around on their fucking streets and Hezbollah work in their streets. Be so heavily influenced by Iran to just continue to stoke this never-ending campaign of fodder, because that's what you're being used as. It's just fodder, it's mincemeat for various other tactical and strategic reasons. I would say fuck no, and I would want peace. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that Israel has proven that they can go for durations of time peacefully, and I would encourage that. Of course, I think that would be amazing. I don't think Charlie Kirk was assassinated by secret Israelis or a secret cult of people, and I don't think his wife has been embodied by a lizard person. And I really think that we should stop, hating on the Jews so much, because the stuff that the level that it's being taken to is so insane. I really wish we would just stop hating on each other so much. But yeah, guys, it makes sense for the Jews to be involved in everything, because if you're first generation child of somebody who lived through something like this, the Holocaust, you're going to do everything that you possibly can to make sure that your children are equipped with the tools to survive. You already try to do that. Imagine your parents having lived through that firsthand experience, seeing the nightmares, the trauma, the effects, the 1,000-mile stares, the dazing off, the deformations on their body that have never fully recovered and healed. That's just my 2 cents. But again, what do I know? Nothing. That's just my own personal opinion. I could be wrong about everything. You make up your own mind.